So hello everybody and welcome to October's webinar. And today we will be discussing the best practices for implementing VR training in your organisation. I'm Sophie Thompson, co-founder and CEO of VirtualSpeech, which is an online platform that blends e-learning with AI-powered practice exercises, which are available online and in virtual reality. As always, if you're joining us live and have any questions or comments, please pop them in the Q&A box and I'll make sure that we ask our guest. And today's guest is Lina Srebrova, who's an XR strategist at Digitalnauts. Digitalnauts provide end-to-end XR solutions for businesses, making immersive tech more accessible for larger organizations. Lina has over 4 years of experience working at Digitalnauts, supporting companies on their journey with XR from consultancy, content development, and distribution as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Lina.
Thank you so much for having me. It was honestly amazing when you first invited me. So very happy to be here. I was just thinking a lot when you were introducing me, and it has actually been exactly 4 years, pretty much right now, since I joined the company. So this is almost like a little nice way to mark my anniversary.
Yeah, your 4-year anniversary. Happy 4 years in XR.
Thank you. It's been the most dynamic and exciting and crazy 4 years, probably of my life, but yeah, I love it.
Best, yeah. And how did you first get into the XR space, or has it always been Digitalnauts? Did you do anything in XR before?
It's actually interesting because that was the first job I had after university. So it was right after I finished my master's degree. I had a conversation with the guys. At the time, they were looking for someone as an intern. And guess what? They actually never took me. And I think I've never actually forgiven them for that. And I know they're listening, which is amazing. But yeah, they actually gave me a call maybe about a few months later when they had a better roadmap in mind and a kind of better overall structure in the company. So they actually invited me to join full time. So yeah, my background up to then was exactly zero XR in immersive technologies and a lot more on the business side. So yeah, did a couple of degrees, just a standard kind of business degree. And I was always looking at new ways of defining business and using new ways to, create value for companies. So initially it was like a social kind of value and how you can create that. Then it was more innovation and technology. And I think the first day when I actually joined the company and I put on the glasses, at the time I called them glasses as well, so because I had no idea what I was going through. It was very exciting because I just realized there's a huge potential from a business perspective, from any type of organization. It was just mind blowing, and I only tried Richie's plank, so you can imagine. It is a very exciting experience. Obviously, you're walking outside of a building and everything, but I was just thinking, wow, there's so much you can do.
Yeah, it's a great taster experience. It's when you see people at conferences walking along a wooden plank with a headset on, and you're like, I know exactly what you're doing.
And that first time, honestly, when someone joins virtual reality for the first time and they try it, and it's just when they take off the headset, then you can see their eyes just lit up. I think that's my favorite part of the job. Just people actually realizing this is here, it's available, I can use it, and it's not just for games.
Yeah, and it can trick your mind, because I sometimes have people be like, do you really think? Do you really have an emotional response? And I sometimes use the Richie's plank example because it's the easiest one that people can relate to before you then talk about, in our case, things like public speaking. So could you start off by telling us a bit more about Digitalnauts, and then we'll look more broadly at the enterprise space?
Yeah, that sounds good. So I joined quite in the beginning of the journey. However, there was a bit pre-Lina period. And so basically, Digitalnauts was born kind of at the intersection of traditional e-learning and serious games development. And that's these are the backgrounds of our co-founders, Mark and Charles. So I think it was very natural next step for them to try virtual reality for training because they recognized very early on how it can be used, just like myself. But they entered the market almost too early when people were still not very familiar. So that was like 2016, 2017.
Yeah,
So it
can
took them a
relate to
couple
that.
of years. Yeah, it must have been an interesting journey, I think, back in the day. But even when I joined, so I joined in 2019, and I think that's exactly when things were picking up and people are starting to open up for the technology. And then COVID, which obviously was like a big, I think, just it just unlocked a whole new potential for our industry. It just made people understand that there's so much that they can do collaboratively and remotely, that they can actually use technology as a tool, as part of, their everyday life. And that, there's so many things that you just can't do if you don't have that kind of space around you that's pretty much immersive. And I think that's what just changed completely our company as well, because from only virtual reality training, it went to, actually, this is a big visualization and communication tool, and you can use it across so many different departments in the company. So I think we just realized, right, why don't we just use it to the fullest of its potential? So currently we create different types of bespoke solutions that just solve critical business issues, but using anything virtual reality, augmented reality, that kind of extended reality spectrum in its core. And I think that just changed our own clients' perspective of the technology as well.
Yeah,
So
opened
our
up
mission
their
is still
minds.
to make, sorry.
It opened up their minds to it as well.
Yes, definitely. But I think it was a big journey, both for ourselves and for industry and for the people that are actually working, their day-to-day jobs, and then they're just like exploring how they can make things better and create more efficiencies and enhance productivity. But our mission is still to make it more accessible, because that's definitely something that can be challenging, and a lot of people are finding it hard.
Yeah, definitely. And so in terms of use cases, so obviously training is one of the use cases. What are some of the other sorts of projects that you've worked on?
So I think from training, that most kind of logical next step was collaborative training, which is where we basically allowed people from all over the world to join into a training scenario and do things together. And then from there, we kind of realized, so why don't we just take any other existing assets that are 3D, could be 2D as well. It just depends really on what you have, but just see what you can actually do with them in virtual reality. So one of the biggest projects after training was a project that we did with Stena, the big maritime company. And it was all around basically allowing engineers and stakeholders from all over the world to join a ship before it was even built. So they could look at every single little aspect of it, and they could communicate to investors, to people that are not necessarily experts, how they can actually, make their way around. They can understand what fits and what doesn't fit, and how exactly do you get it approved if everyone is situated all over the world and you're currently just shipping massive sheets of paper in 2D. So yeah, that was a very big kind of thing for us. And I think from there, it all just kind of got into visualizing complex 3D data in real time or offline, and a lot of kind of projects on the side of design reviews and planning collaboratively.
Cool, very cool. And over the last 4 years, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've seen for successful adoption in enterprise?
To be honest, there's a few different ones, and I think they all kind of probably come with any new technology, anyways. So they're no surprise. But I think one of the big ones is just knowledge, and just making sure that people are aware of the technology. They're not afraid to try it. They know the capabilities and what it can deliver. I think that really, really allows everyone to just open their minds for the possibilities of, everything that can be done. But there's still a big barrier in terms of it's being used mostly for gaming. People have so many unknowns, and it's such a new thing that it's just sometimes a big barrier. The other one is probably that our industry is not exactly at a very finished like stage where, it's pretty much still growing, it's emerging, and there's no specific standards, and people are finding it hard to navigate a space if they don't know, this is exactly what I'm going to get. So there's that unpredictability and the fact that everything is a bit more fragmented than you would expect with, usual industries that are now developed, because there's a big separation of different companies are doing their own projects, but there's no really one common ground for everyone to move it forward.
Yeah, we found that as
you
well.
Can relate as well.
Yeah, we found that as well, even in things like the business models of different VR companies, is that we all at the moment seem to charge differently. So we do like per user per year, but then some people do per session or per hour, or there's lots of different types of pricing that, because there's not become like one industry standard yet for VR or VR training, that can actually be a bit confusing for enterprises looking into the space, I think.
Yeah, and I think the fact, that was even an example that, I felt like I've never even thought so much about the fact that there's just different types of, models in terms of, like business models, because from our perspective, it's usually been, right, so we have this amount of headsets, but then if the headsets are going to change in the future, then how do we make sure that whatever we develop is future-proof, or how do you actually manage different headsets and different content if they are located in different parts of the world and you have multiple people kind of doing that? But it's very interesting to hear that from your perspective. Even the slightest kind of, how do we make it commercially actually matters a lot. And I think it just goes to show how varied everything is in terms of, one kind of VR company space to another.
Yeah. And talking about headsets, which headsets do most of your customers tend to use?
That's a very interesting one, because we find that many people are obviously jumping on the Meta Quest 2. We literally just got shipped the Quest 3s today. I saw that most people on LinkedIn seem to be getting their parcels with Quest 3s at the same time. So it's almost like little Christmas for everyone. But obviously they're not designed for business use. So they're consumer headsets, and there are some limitations around that. And I think, especially when we're talking about enterprise and scale and security, there are always some questions around that. So in the past maybe couple of years, the ones that we've been using most with our clients has been the Pico headsets, specifically because they have a dedicated enterprise part of, just their new line of headsets. And I think they've been gaining a lot of popularity.
Yeah, we have some clients using them.
From your perspective?
Yeah, most of our clients do still use the Quest headsets.
Yeah.
But the second most popular at the moment are the Pico Neo headsets. The Neo 3 we're on at the moment.
All right, okay, because we're actually on the Pico 4 Enterprise. Which is kind of has very, very similar functionality as the new Meta Quest 3. So it'd be very, very interesting for me to compare the two, because they came up with very similar features first, almost 10 months ago, maybe a whole year ago.
Yeah, I think
it would be interesting to see how that develops going forward.
Yeah, was it AWE last year or Learning Tech this year? I remember seeing them at a conference when they were launching the new features, and I think someone was copying someone's homework along the way with the Pico.
I think that's always going to be the case, going forward. But it's good to see that there's more than one company that's actually competing, I think, in the space, because, every use case is quite unique, and you need to think about what sort of delivery you're going to have and what hardware do you need and what devices are the best ones that are suited to your specific case.
Yeah, and it drives innovation as well, so that both, say, Pico and Meta can be like the best that they can be. Absolutely. As well. So
things are moving a lot faster, it seems, since maybe the past couple of years.
Yeah, the reason Pico 3 was in my head is because I'm doing a presentation at the moment, and I'm talking about like where we started with this one client and where we are today. And we started off with the Merge VR headsets that you put the phone into them. Then we went to Pico Neo 2, Neo 3, and that's why I was like, which Pico are we on now? But yeah, I mean, that was all in the space of like 5 years. So it's amazing to think where we might be in another 5 years' time.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So for anybody who is with us live or watching this back, what would your advice be to anyone looking to introduce VR or immersive learning specifically into their organization?
I think there are quite a few key things that you can kind of get wrong from the get-go. And we've seen that happening, unfortunately. Sometimes we've been part of that happening. I'm sure the guys will tell you in the comments that one time that we developed a VR simulator for a coffee machine just because someone wanted to look very, very innovative. And we got, we are quite new still. And we were like, okay, let's see how that's going to go. But I think that example of something that seems completely obsolete to actually, do in VR, just brings me to the point of you need to really make sure to have a very good business case before you start anything. So you need to have a very specific need that you're addressing using this immersive, whatever kind of content it is. So what are your goals? What are your objectives? And why immersive? Many times people are approaching us and it's actually something that they're trying to achieve that could easily be done just by using a video. But sometimes, there are specific cases where there's no other way you can actually do that apart from virtual reality. I think these are the strong ones, together with the ones that require you basically doing very standardized type of training in a very large scale. And you need to make sure it's to the same high standard every single time that you actually deliver it. There's so many, different ways to get that wrong. Some people are mixing their learning objectives with their business objectives. So, just because you're tracking everything that's happening in the application, and because you've put your objectives for what you want to achieve from a learning perspective, that doesn't mean this is actually matching what the business is currently trying to achieve. So I think it's quite important to make the distinguished kind of difference, is this actually something that's helping my company go forward? And then there's many different ways that question could be answered. And I think, in terms of measuring success, just make sure you know from the very beginning how you're going to measure that. Because many companies start just with a trial. And, we used to call it a proof of concept, but I think we've agreed internally that a proof of value is a much better way to put that, because you really need to prove, is this the right mechanism for me to deliver whatever I'm trying to deliver, the message, the training. And you need to make sure that after that trial period, you actually know, have I been successful or not? And what is the next step? Because otherwise you end up with developing a lot of things that at the end of the day are probably going to catch dust somewhere now, cupboard, if you don't have a very clear vision and a roadmap on how to deliver it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think it's a problem in the L&D industry anyway, is how do you measure success, especially there's some skills where it's just easier to quantifiably measure success than other skills. So for example, if somebody listening was to put a business case together to their manager about they've identified a problem, they believe VR could be the solution for it, what are the sort of success metrics that they could highlight, or how could they track ROI?
I think this is where it could become a little bit challenging, because every case that we've pretty much worked on so far has been unique in terms of different types of training. People are trying to achieve different things. There's a lot around, health and safety. There's a lot around delivering remote content to people that are not physically able to get to a certain location. There's a lot around just recreating, things that are not being able to practice in the real world. And I think that's where the value is very clear, because that let's say it's an emergency situation. There's no way in the real world, even if you were to play out a scenario or anything, you actually can't recreate that. Be it fire, be it flood. We've done so many things that sound absolutely horrible in the real world, but we get proper excited about how do you actually proper recreate that in the virtual world. So it could be electricity, it could be any type of very dangerous situation. But there's the other more subtle ones where it could be, is it more like an assessment type of module? So then you can count the different, types of mistakes. You can count, obviously measure people's eye tracking and everywhere they're looking. Are they maybe concentrating on the wrong place? And I think it could be very personal and it could be very specific to the case. But I think once you sit down and actually think about, right, what are the things that are possible for me to measure, and then how is that going to then address my overall business goal, there are multiple different ways to do it. So I wouldn't say there's just these set ways to measure success. I mean, we've done quite a few different marketing applications, and there's various ways that you can measure, are people more engaged with them, is this a better way to communicate my message? So I would just say probably the best way to go about it is just to very consciously approach the topic and just have a good discussion, ideally in a cross kind of departmental team, because so that you can see different people's perspectives. You can maybe see where some of the blockers might be coming from, because sometimes you might have IT interfering and having their own way of setting up specific devices and having their own kind of rules and limitations. But there's also so many ideas that can come from different members that have different pain points in the team.
Yeah, so there's no one size fits all. There's no standard. It's just entirely depends.
Yeah. I think that's where knowledge comes in place, because if you know everything that could be tracked, and if you have this knowledge and you know where VR can deliver the most value, then you can make an educated decision on what is the best way forward, basically.
And what to track and how you can measure that ROI.
Yeah, because it gives you so many different options. And it's sometimes, to be honest, it's good to start with specific measurement in mind, but then you get surprised at the end when you look at all the data and everything that you gathered from multiple different participants. We had a case like that where the company was pretty much a big pharma company, working on quite expensive different types of solutions. And it was all about producing a solution only twice a year. And so they had to basically put everyone in this clean room environment, and they assumed that people were forgetting the process because they were only trained and they were doing it physically very rarely. But at the end, when they were looking at the data, it turned out that because they were actually so used to being in a clean room environment and using it for other stuff, they were sometimes just being a bit more negligent with the equipment and what they were doing. And maybe they weren't paying attention to, how, they were maybe touching different parts of either the floor or other equipment. So sometimes there will be data points that will come in a hindsight, but that's why it's good to just be able to change then your analytics structure and then just update that. And it's so easy to do when it comes to VR.
Yeah, because that is one of the benefits of VR, is that wealth of data that you can collect, and especially behavioral data. Like if you've made that assumption that they're probably not doing well on this exercise because of X, and then you put them in VR and it completely replicates what they're doing, and you realize that assumption may have been completely wrong and it's something else.
I don't have a huge experience in soft skills, but I can imagine it's even so much better from your perspective, because that's where the human interactions and every very subtle, it could be the voice, it could be where you're looking. These are really key factors to actually tell you how the person is doing, or it could be very subtle nuances, and there's no
Yeah.
way to obviously measure that in real life, unfortunately.
Yeah, it can
So
measure it in a much more objective way than subjective way in VR, because typically with things like soft skills, whether that's public speaking, leadership, difficult communication, like anything like that, it's based on like how you feel it went. But if you're somebody, for example, who, I don't know, has low confidence or imposter syndrome, you're probably going to think you didn't do that well anyway, but you actually might have done better than you thought. And so, yeah, it can really help to increase the skill and the confidence in that skill as well. When you've had enterprise rollouts, have you or your clients encountered employee resistance to using VR? And have you noticed any kind of pattern in that resistance, whether that's across like certain industries or certain departments, that kind of thing?
I think the resistance comes in kind of like different stages, probably. And there's always that initial one, especially for people that have never ever tried VR. And I think that one can very easily usually get solved when they, physically put on the headset and they actually experience something. It doesn't even matter what it is. You can always start with something very subtle just so people feel comfortable. And then you can kind of move to something that's a bit more dynamic and interactive. So yeah, that one it's quite easy to go through. And there's always maybe a couple of people that have tried VR in the past and they were like, oh, it made me sick. I didn't enjoy that. We very, very recently were at an event. I think it was an onshore wind event. And basically someone that was at the state, just at a stand in front of us, he kept on looking at what we are doing and, just smiling from afar. And we had a little chat and we were like, oh, so why don't you try some? And he was like, oh, you know what? I actually recently tried virtual reality. It was part of a service that I got to fit my new kitchen. And I was able to visualize how the kitchen was going to look like. However, it kept on making me really sick and I really didn't enjoy the experience because I just didn't feel very comfortable. So it was interesting to see the way he was kind of, a little bit on the side and looking at other people. At the end of the day, he actually came back to us. There was a couple of his colleagues as well, and we were doing a little competition that was in VR, just playing like a very simple game type, Beat Saber type, where, you obviously have different objects coming your way. It's very interactive. It's quite competitive. So he competed against two other people from his team. And we just compared the scores and they had a good laugh because the one that was most confident actually ended up kind of in the middle. So basically he tried it. He said, and he was actually standing. That's a very, I think, important one. He was standing on top of a platform that was literally kind of floating over the Scottish Highlands. And so he had this massive view of, the highlands, and it felt like, he was very, very high up. And it was fascinating to see that guy completely relaxed in the environment. He had like a good look around and everything. And we were talking afterwards. Why did he feel different? And he said it was just natural. It was just completely different. Like the way I was moving, everything was smooth. I didn't feel anything at all. And I think it really depends on a couple of things. Obviously, the hardware. Like if you're using like an older headset, there are chances that, the quality was not that good. There was ways for you to, it is definitely, you can take the difference of new headsets and older
Yeah.
headsets. But I think the more important feature is how the content was developed, and if it was developed in a very kind of intuitive way, and how the user experience feels and the user interface and how easy it is for you to actually interact with everything that's around you. So I think it's all coming to the fact that you need to experience it, you need to try it, and you need to give it the benefit of the doubt. And basically, it's almost like everything is developing, and we see, smartphones going like, they started very basic and look at where they are now. So it's really having that trust and that openness to try something new. I think usually once people try, it's definitely a very different conversation after.
Yeah, and even every VR experience is very different because it's been built differently. So if you've felt motion sickness in one VR experience, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to feel it in another experience, because it may have been built differently. You may be having a different headset. And I think even things like room temperature, room circulation affect things like motion sickness too. There's so many factors that go into it that just the fact it's VR doesn't equal motion sickness necessarily if you've experienced it once before.
Definitely. And I think a funny one just to add on to that is obviously when you go to a conference, like you always have like a little drink or something like that at the reception. And we've had to do some kind of after parties with a bit of fun in VR. They don't really go together very well. I wouldn't recommend, having a drink and then jumping into VR, especially if it's your first time trying it. Probably stay away from that, because it does have to do a lot with obviously your balance and visualization and everything. And we've heard a couple of people talking about that. But I think a general tip, not that I'm kind of thinking about it again, would probably be just move according to the target audience. So if you know who you're delivering whatever you are producing to, if you know that the people are less experienced, if you know that they might have a barrier to overcome first, you can always start with something that's a lot more passive, a lot more easy to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be simply sitting on your chair. It can be completely, just you sitting and experiencing something to begin with, and then move to something else. And I think that that's always a good way to gradually improve on any type of resistance from that side.
Yeah, let's have like a beginner's level 1 introductory, and then rather than throwing them in at the deep end.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I've seen many people kind of go straight to, even Richie's plank experience is sometimes too much for some people. And, yes, if you're more adventurous, you can jump into, straight into the heights, literally. But I think there's so many different ways to ease someone into it. Tutorials help so much, just having something that you get used to the controllers and you get used to the environment. And hopefully soon we won't even use the controllers, because obviously there's so much more hand tracking functionality coming. So I think, just stick with it. XR is here to stay.
Yeah. Even in like 5 years' time, we'll probably look back at conversations like this and be like, oh, as if we used to have to teach people how to use controllers, because it might just be much more part of people's everyday life, in the same way that, as you say, smartphones have came on so much in the first 5 years. In terms of enterprise VR, I know that one of the biggest hesitations that we've seen post-pilot is around scalability of immersive learning. So how have you or your customers addressed that?
To be honest, out of all the challenges that we have had over the past few years, that has to be one of the kind of main one that we encountered in the company, especially in the very beginning, because the old way of us sharing any type of content, and I think that was basically the case, if not even now, the majority of the companies was either on Google Drive or on memory sticks, which, just thinking about it, it sounds so wrong on so many different levels. But I think, that's where you need to start, and you need to acknowledge that as a problem and then basically address it going forward. So it used to take a very long time, both from the perspective of whoever is delivering the training, because obviously you can't expect that everyone is going to be incredibly comfortable with installing content and going through like a lot of different instructions in terms of how do you actually get to use it in the first place. Obviously, from a developer's perspective, or the even if you had a tiny little update or a little fix while you are still developing the content, there was no easy way to actually share that, which just made communication with clients, that extra bit more complicated, and obviously prone to so many more misunderstandings in terms of what they've asked for and what they've got, and maybe this is the initial side, and then you get a few updates down the way. so it was very, very challenging to do any type of kind of fixes, and even quick ones were taking forever. But also, I think because it was something not very familiar, again, that kind of, yeah, but I'm not in IT and I'm not meant to be doing all these things. But then there's IT and they have their own kind of job. And people are used to existing tools and existing, familiar kind of platforms, and there was nothing like that for XR in the space. I think, yeah, it's definitely something out there in the big ones. I would like to hear actually from your perspective, how has that kind of been? Because obviously you guys have a bit of a different type of platform. It's a lot more web based, and I know you have kind of different ways to deliver the content. But how has that been on your side?
I think, I mean, one way that we have overcome that is that we do now have a web-based version. So we have it in WebGL. So you don't need a VR headset to do the practice exercises. Obviously, it's not immersive, but it's much more scalable. It has the scalability of e-learning, but with the active learning of VR training. Obviously, though, it's not immersive. So ideally, we would want people to use the immersive version because that is ultimately more effective. What our customers tend to have done is have a few headsets in key central locations, and then employees will go to that central location and borrow the headset, whether that's in a particular meeting room in that building or if they take it home in kind of like a library style system. But I mean, that all takes time to do. And so when you're talking about scaling into hundreds, it's actually still very different to scaling into thousands, because if you're scaling into thousands, you need a lot of those different hubs. And so that's where the online version comes in as well for us.
So I think, there, because of obviously everything has moved very fast, and there was very little functionality when it comes to web, especially connecting that into VR. And then there were so many different changes, starting from desktop VR, where you had like the big headset and, the tethered kind of cable going all around the room and everything from the outside. It was, we've come a long way from there all the way to mobile headsets, and now I'm walking around literally with a headset in my handbag at most times because it's either meeting a client or going to a conference. But the fact that they're becoming smaller and a lot more easy to access, I think that kind of whole environment of changes has actually pushed us to work on our own platform that basically allows this type of scalability, managing both the devices but also the content, and having a visibility of who are the users, and having some, having that security that once you develop that usually, quite expensive piece of content, it actually stays within limits of people accessing it completely for free, because it's quite easy if you don't have something in place to actually develop something for a client and then find it used somewhere else by whoever got their hands on it. And considering it could be quite easy to copy any type of content when it comes to just traditional APKs. I think that was a big change. We developed a platform for our own customers and for our own needs, but only because there wasn't really anything at the time that existed. So like, I think it's been now a good 3 years that we've been, probably even more, into this development. So yeah, the platform is called HoloHub. And it's really, we are our best customers. We are our best kind of use case because we use it all the time for any type of content and updates with our customers, and they also use it to deliver to their kind of end users. Okay. So I think that's changed a lot of, just in terms of time and in terms of effort, how we do the scalability part of our implementation.
Yeah. So does it work kind of like a mobile device manager system where they can then push the APK to different headsets?
So it has that functionality where you can push content remotely, but it's quite different from a mobile device management system. We have a very light version of the mobile device manager where you can just see the health of your devices, you can see what's been installed on them, and you can push that content remotely. But we really concentrate on making it very easy for both the end user and also the administrator of the training, so whoever is delivering it, to have this kind of common platform where they can do things very simple and very quick. So from a developer's perspective, they can use it with their own customers and they can use it. It's completely open pretty much for anyone who has existing content. It's open to different types of platforms. So it could be web, mobile, desktop. It could also be delivered through different engines. So we're not agnostic in any way. But I think the main part was, just making that extra simplicity. We were talking about people not knowing how to approach the technology. And I think a big part of that is actually, delivering it and actually, using it. Because if you need to go for 1,000 different logins and you have different passwords and different platforms and you can't integrate with your existing tools, then it becomes an obstruction as opposed to making it easier for you to do your job.
Yeah, comes back to wanting to make it as easy as possible for people. Do you have a demo, or could you give us a 3-minute tour of HoloHub?
So I probably couldn't show you a demo as such, but I think I can just run you through the platform myself because it runs on a normal kind of desktop from the admin perspective. So I can just share my screen and just run you from what it looks like from my perspective because I use it pretty much every day. So let me just share the screen.
And then we've got a couple of questions to finish off with as well from the audience.
The time went so fast.
Time flies when you're having fun.
You're having fun, right? Then when you're actually being a brilliant host. So thank you so much.
Oh, bless you, Lina.
It's been such a fun chat as well, before and after, I'm sure. Right, so let me share the tab. Sorry, I'm just trying to go back to actually logging in so that I can kind of have a bit of the experience from the beginning.
Mark Baxter, who I believe is one of your co-founders, says, "Good job."
Thank you, Mark. I'm sure you're very unbiased in your opinion. Right. Okay. So would you be able to tell me if I am currently sharing?
Yeah, you're sharing just a tab.
Okay. Perfect. So you can basically see the HoloHub window open?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay. So it's I'm just going to log in and just show you everything from the beginning. Now I've had very, very slow internet all day today, as tradition goes, every time before a webinar. So please be patient with me in case things are going very, very slow. But basically, this is kind of like the dashboard. The way we were building it is specifically for an enterprise, and it's also very much inspired by traditional learning management system.
Yeah.
So a lot of this should look quite familiar to that, but it's obviously our kind of take on how do you use that, but for immersive content. And it's not just limited to training as well, so it's completely open to what type. So we start with a little dashboard. You have your kind of usual, this is, your little steps on navigating the space. You get some analytics platform ones, the ones that are connected to actual tracking and data analytics. They come through kind of like a separate portal, but you can basically see how it connects to any type of platform that is using traditional XAPI statements. And basically, here we have a very, very who are your most recent users? What are you using? Just a very generic stuff. Then in terms of the portal with the most important stuff, the applications, this is how it looks from an admin perspective. So keep in mind, we're using this for our own kind of internal, there's 100 things that are literally with the exact same name, but we're just using different releases for different headsets. So you can actually, if you go to the details, maybe I'll click on this one. This is an application that we built, which is in construction. You can kind of go through, this is what the module is all about, your usual, like how long it takes. You can also see different types of releases. So this one has only had one version, so it's quite easy, but usually you can kind of see every single time that you've been updated, are you on the latest version? You can add any type of media. Here we mostly have some little pictures, but you can add videos or PDFs, pretty much anything that you would find in a traditional kind of SharePoint style. You have also your requirements. So if in doubt, you can obviously check what system does it run on and what you need. Yeah, I think sometimes it gives people a little bit of just reassurance that I'm doing this right. Sometimes if you have like a couple of different, headsets available, it's very easy. I'll show you the mobile device management side as well to just distinguish between what you have, what is on it, and everything. So we are currently working on being able to license out the content as well. So it's, again, something that's currently early access stage, but basically you have different ways of limiting who can actually access your content. So it could be by number of people or users, it could be by sessions, or here it could be timed. So for example, you can give someone a license for a year and then, be basically absolutely comfortable with the fact that after 1 year, they're going to be discontinued from using the content. And I think from developers' perspective, having that extra security and having complete control just, is actually something that we've never, ever had before.
It's reassuring.
Yeah. And especially for the enterprise as well, because at the end of the day, they are the people that are actually paying, for you to actually develop something for them. So making sure it's always secure. This is what the device management kind of looks like. You can see we have so many different headsets in the company. And basically, you can see different types of information in terms of the health. I'm trying to load. I have to apologize because every time you have like is a traditional, we're having a live demo and I can see it kind of trying to load. And yes, it's the traditional kind of health like status of the headset. And then you actually have all the applications that are currently there. So that's where you can see, has it been used? When was it used last? You can update the content, and that's where you can push any type of applications remotely. So I think from an end user, that's where it makes change, because you don't have to basically have multiple different applications open with separate like login details and everything. It's just once you log Full Hub, that's you. You don't need to worry about any of that.
Kind of like a single sign-on system, but for your VR apps.
Yeah. So we're just introducing single sign-on as like a standard as part of the platform as well. So I think there's just a couple of different other settings. In terms of the users, I always compare it to SharePoint because I feel like it's such an easy way to do it. You basically have your own little hub, and then you can just invite users. So you can decide yourself, basically, if you want to invite them at different kind of types of managerial, depending on where they are. So they could be just a user. If you want them to just see the content, be able to access it, you can have a manager and an admin. So basically they all have higher types of access to all different areas and pushing content and everything. And you can basically just send an invitation, put in the email, and then they'll receive an email and then be able to join in. We've made logging into VR a lot quicker as well. So you just have your PIN. So after the first time you log in, you don't need to put your password and your email as well, because we all know exactly how painful it could be to put all your details, just clicking there,
Yeah,
standing one by
typing in
one.
VR.
Yeah, always fun, always fun. And because it's like cross devices as well, you can actually run that on your phone. You can see the pin on your phone, and you don't need. Well, I guess with the new pass-through, you'll be able to see your desktop anyways very clearly. But yeah, you can run it basically on any different device. But yeah, just before I wrap up, I just wanted to show you how it looks from an end user perspective. So that was the admin, and then
Okay.
from an end user, it's very simple. You basically have a little, this is how you install the content, this is how you install the platform, and then you have all your applications. And it's exactly how it works in VR as well. So you just can go through your web ones, your mobile ones, your desktop ones, and you only see the ones that are relevant for whatever platform you're using to basically do it. And then all you need to do is basically just click on it, launch it, no, install it, and then launch it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that was the very quick kind of whistle stop tour of the
Great,
platform.
thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Looks great.
Thank you so much as
Thank
well.
you.
I think it could be interesting as well to kind of hear from your perspective, in terms of, is it quite challenging to have kind of multiple different ways to deploy the content? Because I think when we spoke last, you were mentioning that you're currently using. I think you just actually launched your content on the Meta Store.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously if you have that in a lot of different platforms, like how do you feel about basically delivering the content in multiple different places? I'm just kind of curious from my own
Yeah.
perspective, I guess.
So I'm not on the dev team, so I can't
All right.
speak from personal experience there. But I
Yeah.
think it is easier for us compared to other VR platforms, because our content is like 90%, 95% is off the shelf content. So
Yeah.
whereas most other VR platforms are doing custom content, which
Mhm.
obviously has lots of different new builds on it, we just continuously update the same APK for VirtualSpeech, and then people have different logins, which gives them different access. So yeah, I think it's less painful. If we've got any of my team on on the chat, please feel free to be like,
The one in the comment section.
yeah, feel free to go in the comments section and tell me that I'm wrong. But yeah, I think it is easier for us because we just have that single APK. Obviously we have to still do it for the different platforms, but it's not like we have to do multiple apps for the different platforms as well.
I think that's good to know from our perspective as well, because we've tried everything. I feel, because of the types of content we've delivered. We've had mobile, we had web, we've done off the shelf, we've done bespoke. So for us, it was important to have something that can actually run every single different kind of piece of work that we've done. But because we've been talking also with so many different developers, and every single one of them has like a different type of kind of their own challenge. We've tried to incorporate all the feedback and put in the things that we feel like this is the core.
Yes.
But yeah, we'd be more than happy to give people, access. They can try it, and yeah, I would love to just hear from anyone who's in the audience if that is also something that they've been struggling with. So
Yes,
yeah.
great, thank you. So yeah, audience, feel free to pop your comments in the Q&A. So we don't have the comments turned on, it's just the Q&A.
All right. Okay.
So while people drip feed in their feedback there, we'll go to a couple of questions. So we have a question from Chris saying, with the Meta Quest for Business coming soon, what are the ideal shopping list items for businesses to consider for their headset choices?
Okay, I think that's a very interesting one.
Yes, good
So
question.
obviously the Meta Quest was, the business version was discontinued. So it will be interesting to see is there going to be basically a dedicated store mostly from the business content? So I think from our perspective, a lot of where we've been working with companies has been, this type of bespoke content or very much specific for the organization. So it's a little bit harder for me to know, first of all, what are the ones that will be specifically available on that specific headset? Is there going to be a dedicated store? But, for me, anything that is around collaborative environments is definitely worth exploring because there's so many different use cases you can put there. It could be just communicating better your ideas with clients, but it could also be internally in your team. So it's about how can you make the most out of one application for like multiple different use cases.
Yeah.
Do you have some suggestions yourself? Are you more familiar with kind of what's on the roadmap for that headset?
I think I would just say to like try lots of different things if you're looking to enter into the enterprise space and bring VR into your organization. There's a lot of apps, VirtualSpeech included actually, that have a free version, which obviously has limited functionality, but can give you a kind of like taster. Or some people do free trials, like we do free trials, so that there's no risk to trying out various different platforms, whether that be for training, productivity, collaborating, and so on, just to try out a variety of them and see which fits your use case. But also, even if it doesn't immediately, it's given you that kind of food for thought that you're now aware of what's out there. So if you do encounter a problem where you think that VR could be the solution, you're a bit more educated around what the possibilities are.
I'm all for exploring as long as it's free, because I've done it so many times, just get kind of roaming onto either SideQuest or any different kind of stores, because there's always something new, there's always something exciting, and there's always something that you've not tried that you're like, oh, this is like an amazing. From my point of view, it's a demonstrator usually, but I think companies can learn a lot just by being a bit more brave and trying things themselves. Definitely.
Yeah, and especially when they're free, you've literally got nothing to lose if they're a free trial. So
just a weekend well spent in VR, like trying different things.
Joel has asked, how do you view the maybe trending MR? And then they've asked specifically, will VirtualSpeech do some product changes with mixed reality headsets? So I'll answer the second bit first, and then we'll come over about the MR more generally. In terms of VirtualSpeech, yes, we will be doing some product changes for mixed reality devices. So we have already started. We have a very first iteration, like proof of concept, if you like, or proof of value, whichever way you want to look at it. That can show what we can do. That's not live yet. We still need to do a lot more testing on that. But yes, we will be having mixed reality coming in. So, for example, you could be sitting in your office and then looking at like a vacant chair, and then we'll put one of our avatars in that chair, and it's like you are presenting to them, or likewise if you're in a bigger audience. But obviously that is all quite technically complicated. And as I said, I'm not one of our amazing developers, so I don't want to overpromise. And then
I'm pretty sure I saw a video of that. I think you had posted it recently on LinkedIn, where you are showing how it's actually going to look like, and I think that's brilliant. It's such a simple, easy, on the spot. You just bring the avatar in your own space.
And I think it's like it's like less of a friction point. So there's definitely big opportunity there, but obviously it's very technically difficult and time consuming to do, but it is coming, Joel. Thank you. Lina, so what are your views about upcoming mixed reality devices?
So we are definitely, so we used to develop different types of content for mixed reality on the HoloLens previously, and now we're definitely very much ready to implement that in our HoHa platform, because as I mentioned, a big part of why the platform exists is to make it open and interoperable cross-platform. So I think that's where any new headset that's coming out, we will ensure that it's supported. But our use cases are a bit maybe a little bit more different because of the industrial kind of type of companies we usually work with. So for us, there's a lot of kind of reality capture and being able to run through workflow processes basically in that environment, and being able to feed people like, you know, life instructions on any type of work that they're about to do, and then failing to do that, what are then some of the options for you? Can you connect to someone remotely? And we've already experimented a bit with that, but obviously it's been a bit more limited because of the HoloLens kind of discontinuation. But I think we are very much looking forward to especially the new Apple headset coming. So yeah, I think it's going to be a very exciting time for the industry.
Yeah, definitely. I always see the like Apple Vision Pro as kind of like the first iPhone, that like it's not necessarily going to be used by a lot of people, but then look what happened when the iPhone 5 came along and how different that was, and how many people then had that. So I think just even the fact they've entered the market, even though I know people are saying it's expensive and so on, but I mean, iPhones are expensive too. It's just that we think that they are worth it now. Whereas when they first came out, I remember I remember being at school and there was one girl in my year who had an iPhone, and we were like, why do you need the internet on your phone? Like, we've got BBM. Why do you need the internet?
This is brilliant.
Yeah. And then here we are, like however many years later, and we're like, why wouldn't you have the internet on your phone? So I think a lot of those like human behaviors will evolve, and then we'll start to see a bit more of an uptick in mixed reality.
And I think from an enterprise perspective as well, I think that's a very much obvious one. Fair enough, it might not be necessarily everyone has one at home, but I think from an enterprise perspective, there's so many more reasons for them to look into introducing something, although it could be more expensive. However, I actually just saw that there is light version coming, which is more than half of the price of the initial kind of
Vision Pro.
Yeah. I think they just announced that there's going to be. I think they obviously the backlash straight after the introduction was no one would be able to afford that. But things are changing, and they're changing fast. And I think as long as Apple is involved, then it's going to be a lot more mainstream than anyone has ever thought about when it comes to immersive.
Yeah, definitely. Mark has put in a message saying, you're on all the stores, Sophie. It's great for exposure, and always happy to see virtual speech when I put on my Pico. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Mark.
That was nice.
Okay, that concludes our session today. Thank you so much, Lina, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, it was amazing. It's probably my most favorite webinar so far, because it felt like it was just me and you having like a usual catch up that we wouldn't necessarily have the time to do in a normal kind of busy world. So I feel like it was a very good way, to present everything and make it a bit more digestible for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And there were people watching, and there will be people watching when we upload it. So thanks to everybody who tuned in. If you'd like to learn more about successfully implementing VR in your organisation, keep an eye on your inbox, as we'll be sending a couple of free useful resources over to you. Our next webinar will be mid-November, and that will be focused on enterprise training as well, but the specific topic is to be confirmed, so keep your eyes peeled. Thanks again, everybody, and thank you, Lina, and have a great day.